Hello and welcome. Thank you all for joining us here today. I'm Nick Rohn, Director of Technology for the Asset Leadership Network, and we are talking with Rick Justis from the Coalition for Smarter Buildings today. But before we get to him, we just want to thank our patron members, Jacobs, Mantech, Onuma, ABS Quality Evaluations, and CGI, as well as all our organizational members for making this sort of programming possible. And also Kahua, one of our organizational members, is involved in an upcoming event we want to highlight, as well as some other things maybe Executive Director Mike Bordenero wants to talk about.
Yes, thanks, Nick. Kahua is also having a federal program in Washington, D.C. in person on April 8th. And we'll have the registration link for that for next week. But Jim Dieter will be speaking there, and I'll be joining Jim in person in DC on April 8th. And this program that Kahua has on California Education District's use of their project management information system is a really good case study. And then we want to talk about this book that Jim Dieter has turned us on to, Nexus. And it's really insightful and on target for so many of the asset management issues that we're dealing with. Life is much more complex than it used to be. And having a book that guides us through history of the fact that this has happened before is very helpful. So we hope people will join us in that. And on March 25th, we will be talking with Jim about how that goes. So thank you, Nick. How are things in Lander, Wyoming?
Excellent. Like early spring is wild how warm it is here and lovely.
What do you consider warm in February in Wyoming?
I was just on the East Coast, Mike, and it's warmer here than it was there. And maybe it's partially the humidity, but also it's lovely out here right now. Maybe almost 60 degrees feels like in the
That's
sun.
insane. That's scary.
We'll see how it plays out.
Well, that leads us into introducing Rick, because Rick is the executive director of the Coalition for Smarter Buildings, soon to be the Coalition for Smarter Buildings Foundation, which was acquired by Linux. You can see in the chat a link to a press release on that. And what the Coalition for Smarter Buildings represents is the ability for building assets to talk with each other in a more informed manner, so decisions can be made on a higher level. And that's what we need to maybe abate some of the crazy climate activities. But whether or not it helps the world, this approach will help individual organizations, individual buildings perform better. So, Rick, welcome to the Asset Leadership Network.
Thanks, Mike and Nick, and glad to be here. It was, I think, 6 months ago, 9 months ago, I think I made a little quick guest appearance with Anto, so appreciate being able to come back.
And we're able to announce that we have a memorandum of understanding between our organizations. We've been working together really well already, and it's great to make it official. So thank you. But before we get into the details about what the Coalition for Smarter Buildings has achieved, and I consider it to be a really major achievement, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, okay.
Where are you?
I'm in Kansas City. And by the way, it's about 62 degrees here too. So we finally got winter behind us, and we're not talking about the Super Bowl, by the way.
No, we're not at all.
Not at all. But I've been in Kansas City for about 22 years, and gosh, I can't believe it's been that long. But for about 4 decades since I got out of college, I've been kind of on this path of a combination of smart buildings and technology, because I worked for Honeywell coming right out of college 4 decades ago. It's crazy. And
Yes.
back then we started talking about the integration of IT technologies with buildings and how that would make buildings, so much better. And I've been a nerd about technology and communications all my life. And as I was telling Mike, I grew up in the radio and news business, and understanding how radios worked is what was my passion to begin with. But so worked for Honeywell for a while. Then when I went to work for enterprise computing companies like Compaq and Dell and Apple, and then spent 10 years working for Johnson Controls in the pursuit of turning Johnson Controls into a more services oriented company. And then for the last, I think, 12 or so years, I've been working for different startups in a consulting role. And then 4 years ago, we had this idea of creating a nonprofit, a 501c3, that would be focused on bringing attention to the issues that were preventing smarter buildings from proliferating. And by smart buildings, we had this vision of from working with some of the really cool projects nationwide and worldwide, that buildings could be run a lot more effectively with get this, an asset management mindset of long-term thinking relative to all the different moving parts of a building and all the different resources that go into building and planning and running buildings. That information technology was just, and data was just really not being used effectively to um, uh, be better stewards of the buildings, or better plan for better buildings, or plan for better life cycle. So my background was in working for different companies. My passion was in the use of technology to do things in a better way, and it kind of led us to this idea of forming a nonprofit to bring industry people together to solve some of the problems. That was a mouthful.
And it's so good to, first that you plugged asset management, appreciate that. And of course, when you have that holistic thinking, asset management is just natural. What was the reason for the people who got together, who coalesced to create the coalition? Because many have tried to do this, but there is a big buzz and understanding that this is actually going to deliver in ways that other approaches have not.
So it's a great question, and it was kind of during the COVID times when people kind of had nothing better to do than to think about what was going to happen after COVID. Hopefully, there was going to be an after COVID. And so there were different groups that were getting together, just kind of brainstorm about, okay, how do we change things up? And there, once buildings start opening up, people start going back to work, what can we do differently to have better places for people to work and play and live? And so there was a group called Monday Live that was getting together once a week, and I wasn't part of that group at all, but I introduced this idea from my background and my experience, and knowing some of those industry players, that perhaps if we created a more official or formal organization to have a unified voice, perhaps we could get some attention, maybe some funding, maybe some policy changes, but definitely some attention around. We're not going about this the right way somehow, because we're not using enough data. We're not using common standards. We're all solving the problem our own unique way. And however I describe that, going back to that time, it just resonated with people like John Petsy and Jim Lee and Anno Shelton and Anto um, and Ken Sinclair, and just on and on and on. It resonated with them, and they were like, "Yeah, let's formalize this, because it's right. We're not doing as good a job as we could in having our buildings be better places."
Okay, a couple things there. And the first one is you just casually named basically a who's who of energy grid experts. And the fact that they came together and decided that a next step was necessary is significant. And yes, you're familiar with them on a first name basis, but I just wanted to let sure everybody knows that those are power hitters. And so that leads to the idea of the interoperable building box and connection profiles. So this isn't a detailed dive, but can you give us a verbal overview of these elements of the solution set that has been brought into the Linux Foundation? That's a little hint at what we're going to be talking about next, but let's talk about why the Linux Foundation was interested in you.
Well, that's a good sort of timeline, because going back a couple of years, we realized that we needed to get people's heads around, okay, so what's different? What's going to be different? Okay, now that COVID's over and buildings are opening back up, and you've got all these smart people together that have been thinking about these problems for a long time. How do you get your head around there is something different? And we came up with, and I think Anto Budiarja was the one who coined the phrase of interoperable building box, IBB. And as soon as he said that, I kind of held my hand up like this with nothing in it and said, this will give us something to point to get people's heads around, there's something different. And the whole idea of the box was that it's not really a box. I mean, box is just a virtual, it can be a virtual box, it can be a real box, but the whole idea was we needed to have a thing that we could get people's heads around that is new and different. And so the interoperable building box became this place where we started to say applications can run here, and they can run in a different way because they're going to be running on a Linux operating system. They're going to be running in a new way using Kubernetes and containers and things. And a lot of those words would be confusing to people, but it would make them go right to their keyboards and start to search for, okay, what's this new and different way? And when they did that, they would see that Kubernetes and containers and Dapper and Docker are all these new concepts, new IT related concepts that are, again, just a way of getting people's heads out of the old way and kind of into a new way of thinking about how are we going to connect to systems in buildings, and how are we going to connect to do things in a different way.
A little bit more about the box and the virtual empty hand that you hold up. It's so important because we're finding in asset management that it's not the technology, it's not the tools, it's not the processes, it's the human behavior. And for building owners to know that there is a box dedicated to their building,
right,
that can be securely, that can securely allow the communication between their smart assets, is just a psychological relief. And that is a wonderful thing. So I'm glad you held up your empty hand and pointed to this virtual box. That's exactly what's needed.
So conveniently, there's been people all throughout history that have created some new mousetrap and tried to convince people that this new mousetrap is the thing that's going to solve all their problems. And we were kind of doing that. We were saying, well, there's this shiny new object that doesn't exist that is going to make things different. But what I hinted about was that we started realizing that there were these new tools for doing computing environments and building computers in a different way, and that were really taking hold in the IT world and in other domains like in agriculture and automotive. And there were these new tools that were containers and Kubernetes and Docker and this new technology tools that were totally legit, thank goodness. So it gave us the ability to put the fundamental architecture and operating system that was in this new box. And by the way, the price point of the new box was remarkably lower than what was currently available from proprietary vendors. So there was some attraction to that, but it was mostly around getting people's heads around there's a new way. And this is part of the solution, this IBB. It's not the entire solution, but this is part of it.
So we've got to work on a variation of the Emperor's New Clothes, where it's actually good that the emperor's new clothes is virtual and you can't see it, that there's a value to that. Just twist that old fable around. But inside the interoperability box, there's our connection profiles that allow smart assets from different manufacturers to be able to communicate together. Can you tell us a little bit about how this code is different than, or serves a purpose that hasn't been served before?
Yeah, quite often in the history of the industry, relative to connecting to buildings, things were done in a proprietary way, and what we're demonstrating with the IBB and with connection profiles specifically is that if you comply with certain standards ways of running your software on this box, then your software and somebody else's software can actually communicate between each other in a way that has been difficult in the past. And in some, so for technical people have heard about APIs or application programming interfaces. And we were saying that that's too complicated and it's too hard. If you comply with these standards, that communication between systems, so a systems of systems approach, can be accomplished. And that hits people on a aspirational level, but it also hit people on a very well, wait a minute, can that really be done? Can I eliminate some of the complexity of two systems talking to each other? And the answer was, again, conveniently, because of things that are happening in the Linux Foundation and happening in IT tech, that yes, you can now expect a couple of systems, disparate systems, to be able to communicate in a far more simple way.
And to this earlier point I was making about the impact of buildings on climate, because people think it's cars, but we spend more time in our buildings and we leave our building systems running 24 hours. We don't leave our cars running 24/7. That's the issue. The standardization of these protocols allows rapid deployment. Can you talk to that?
Absolutely. And that's where the consistent, making your software or making your applications or making your hardware have a more consistent interface. And that's where the connection profiles comes in, is that if everybody writes to a more consistent interface, then plug and play starts to happen more often. And we have so many examples in the other industries of where plug and play, where we get to that. And I had a USB cord here somewhere a second ago, but there's a ton of intelligence inside of a USB chip, right? But until that happened, everybody had their own way of creating a connector. And so what we're saying is not at the hardware level, like where the USB is, but at the software level, to have that same sort of concept of common predictable interfaces is it's possible now. And it's not difficult to design software or to retrofit software to be able to meet those common interface expectations. So here we've got a box that can run multiple different software all in the same box, complying with containers and Kubernetes and modern technology IT approach. And then we've got the way for the software to be able to more consistently communicate with each other. And now we can get data that's useful from one system to another system, to a third system, to a fifth system, to a 20th system in a very consistent way. And that's not unique to what we're doing with the IBB or unique to our industry even. It's happening in other industries where there's a desire to have better communication between applications without having to go all the way down and figure out what the IP address of some system.
So speaking of IP, one of the things that's different about this approach is that it is cloud native. So once these assets are talking with each other, then they can talk to the internet, generate reports for owners that they can see on their phone, in the ways that all the other industries are. but also talk to the grid. This is something Jennifer will like. It is a real helper of the smart grid.
Yes, and another cool thing about, well, we haven't talked about the Linux Foundation, that the Linux Foundation has a has a focus on energy, LF energy, and really what Alex Thornton, who's my peer, he's executive director of LF Energy, what he is focused on is the grid and the energy transformation, as he says, open source software to accelerate the accelerate grid readiness, grid capability, and the energy transformation. And so his focus over at LFE and our focus on buildings, we just had a call 2 days ago, and I was at Lawrence Berkeley, or was talking to Lawrence Berkeley National Labs yesterday about where grid efforts and whether it's utility companies or grid operators or everybody in the ecosystem of energy, how that now can more efficiently intersect with buildings. There's a lot of promise there. And again, we haven't really talked about the Linux aspect of what we're doing, but but the fact that we're going to intersect with LF Energy is a really key part about what we're.
We'll get to Linux, but I just want to emphasize there were 34 people at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory very interested in this. This
Lawrence
is
Berkeley.
say it again.
Lawrence Berkeley National Labs. There's two different, they're within miles of each other, right?
Yes. So when national lab people are interested in this, it has legs.
Yeah, we had been briefing some of the people from LBL, and from PNNL, Pacific Northwest National Labs, on a fairly regular basis about what our aspirations were, and they were all sorts of encouraging, and also the Department of Energy in Washington D.C. and because we had these legacy contacts with all these people. Well, yesterday when we gave them an update with the fact that there were 30 some people that showed up, which is 3 times as many as were in the room a year ago when we were there, was really a positive sign of their interest in what we're doing, but also because now we're doing it under the umbrella of the Linux Foundation in cooperation with Linux Energy or LF Energy. It just has a different meaning, a different tone.
Yes. So not only was our national laboratories interested, but you attracted the interest of the Linux Foundation. So what is it about what's going on with you that was interesting to the Linux Foundation, and what's happening there? We're going to go into overtime, everybody. I'm not going to stop at the bottom of the hour and say anyone who needs to go can go. Let's just keep rolling. This is, I think, historic, and we're not going to stop.
Well, so because we had created this interoperable building box, and because we were using Linux-based operating system, Kubernetes, containers, and some of those key things, that was one thing that they thought was interesting. But the other, probably more important part, was that we were saying our goal is to impact total cost of ownership, asset management approach, change the way people think about buildings in general, and we have a pretty high level of confidence that we can actually create tools that can very, very clearly, connect the dots for people as to how things can be done differently and in a big, big way. So we didn't say we were trying to create some little application or we were just trying to create the box. The intent of doing all that was to have major impact on a pretty important sector of the world economy. And that sounds fairly grand. Well, guess what? The Linux Foundation, that's what they want to do. So it aligned with their kind of world vision of they've seen in various sectors of the economy, the benefit to individuals, the benefit to the community, the benefit to companies of moving faster, moving forward as a more community-driven efforts around standards, open source, community-based projects, and and the and as many companies as have a difficult time understanding the value of standards or open source, there's more companies that are figuring it out, and they're figuring out that there's a benefit to them, and they can move faster and they become leaders in their industry if they do this. And so the Linux Foundation is saying, okay, well, we're having these great impacts on the financial community, on the automotive community, on um, all the networking community. We'd really like to have more of an impact on the grid and on cities and on buildings. And oh, here you guys are focusing on buildings. You've even got it in your logo name. We, we want to have an impact, and you guys you already have that aspiration. You already have all the Rolodex and all the contacts and all the awareness. And so that's how that's come together.
And that was announced at AHR on February 11th, and your life has been a whirlwind since then, huh?
Has it really been 2 weeks or more? Yeah. So it was really fun. There's AHR is a conference for those who haven't heard of it, or there were 50,800 people that attended that Orlando conference. That was the final clicker total, and we didn't talk to all 50,000. In fact, we didn't even talk to 800, but we did talk to several hundred wandering around the conference with a Linux official. And what was really interesting was to see the response when some people were just finding out the news because we just announced it, and they'd be like, "Oh, awesome! Here's our statement from our company." And in some cases, I think those companies they were they were making up their statement on the fly as to their official position about Linux and open source and open standards. But everybody reflected the fact that what the community wants, what the customers want, is more interoperability, more consistency of how applications work, more data readiness for AI and data being cyber secure and things like that. Everybody was able to articulate these common things, and so the Linux official that we had with us, and I got to keep remembering that I'm actually one of them now. That was, yeah, was she was just remarkably impressed by the fact that people were not like resistant to the idea of open standards and open source. Everybody, including the biggest names that are always associated with proprietary, when we went and talked to those product managers and their leaders, everybody embraced the idea of this is a good thing. This is a good thing for the industry.
And the Asset Leadership Network was mentioned in the announcement, so we knew it was coming, so I made sure to be there. And ALN patron member Kimono Numa was there, and he and I went around and made videos with random manufacturers, and everyone wanted to be there. Kimon, if you could put up the automated buildings link, if you haven't already. Kimon has the videos of people saying, we need open standards. We need to communicate better. So,
and appreciate you guys doing that, because it was like, oh, we got our fingers crossed as to what are people going to say. But I think within the first few minutes of just talking to people about what this was, we started to get a really great sense of everybody was going to be welcoming. And why? It's because the owners, the people that they sell to eventually, have been asking for more standards-based, more open systems. They've seen it in their lives. They've seen it in their cars, their cell phones, in other industries. And it's like, it's about time it happens here. And again, we'd also when we led with this idea of asset management and this framework for total cost of ownership. So we're not unclear of what we're trying to enable in terms of better decisions, better buildings, better places, and models for better stewardship and better design and all of that. We're not unclear at all as to why we're doing it, and it's really cool to get owners' feedback, but also manufacturers acknowledging that, yeah, this is what we need to be doing. And so, thank you for taking the lead at ALN and articulating what the value of asset management framework and mindset is, because that fits really well with what we're trying to say. Well, okay, now here's some of the tools, here's some of the methods, here's some of the things you can do today.
So I've got an anecdote that I would like to share. Once we started posting about this connection profiles and this whole movement, a well-known building industry curmudgeon said, well, I hope they're not just reinventing the wheel. It's been done before. What about Obix and all these other, he listed all these other things. And then Anto's response was, Obix was created during an event that I sponsored. The people who have created connection profiles are the people who were involved in creating Lawnmark and BackNet and all of these other systems. So that's one of the things that makes me realize that this is more than just theory. This is a very well thought out, well researched, highly developed approach that will work when others haven't.
And we do some strategic name dropping, because when people want to know, and they can say, well, what does Ron Bernstein think of this? What does Toby Considine think of this? What what does Jim Lee? And it's like, well, those are the people that have been involved in developing this next frontier. And so that's, and again, we don't do that. We're not trying to be cheeky about it or anything. It's just we would not have taken this on unless we had the agreement of those people, the godfathers and the godmothers of the industry. And
Yeah.
because it has been tried before, people have come barging into the industry and saying, "Oh, we can solve all this. We can solve this in just a couple of weeks." And and I've tried to, well, I may or may not have worked for one or two of those companies in the past, and you just can't do that. You have to have the legacy knowledge of where the skeletons are buried.
Well, let's talk about that, because thank you for acknowledging that the Asset Leadership Network has that owner's perspective, that holistic life cycle approach, and we really want to be representing what's best for asset owners. That's what we're about. And it is possible to muscle a solution for a single owner or a single building or solve an emergency in a few weeks. But what this is establishing a platform for rapid deployment of standardized methods that can circulate around the globe in a matter of years instead of decades.
Yes, and that's what's happening in other industries that are leveraging, for the companies and for the that are leveraging open standards and open source. And so for owners to know that that it can happen quicker, it can happen in a more predictable and consistent and cyber secure way. Yeah, anything can be solved. And the good news is that we talk about these legacy people that have been involved in trying to solve these problems, for decades, or their entire careers. We've always had to do things in proprietary ways because we had to solve the whole technology stack. We had to invent the power cord that powered the processor in the computer. I mean, you couldn't go leverage other innovations from other companies. You kind of had to invent things yourself. And so hey, we got smart people, we can solve that problem. But the new paradigm to go even faster and be more innovative is to leverage others, with the knowledge that everybody kind of complies with this universal set of beliefs of interoperability, or the process that Linux uses for documenting and licensing the different technologies. And what we're seeing in other industries is that knowledge and that confidence just allows people to just hit the accelerator and go faster, to solve the problems, solving problems that we know what the problem is. We know what questions people want. We know what people would like to be able to do better. And now we're going to use a new set of tools to do it. And these tools are going to be more standardized and interoperable.
Well, we had slides, but I think we've covered everything that was in the slides. I don't think we need to go into that. So now we can announce that the ALN is going to be continuing to assist the Coalition for Smarter Buildings Foundation now and Linux with more of our programs. And Rick and I talked earlier, and a familiarization program will be one of the events that we have, time and date to be determined, where we'll go into more detail. We'll use slides, we'll have interactive explanations for people who want to get familiar with this. And then Kimono Numa has agreed to help facilitate an interactive workshop demonstration to show how these connection profiles in the interoperability box can be used. We'll land a building in the middle of an ocean or something that's not real, but people will understand how it can be applied in their context. So we don't have any dates for that, but Rick and I agree that that's good steps from our side.
And we won't just have an empty hand to show either. We'll actually show the IBB, right? But one last really quick thing. You mentioned the Emperor's New Clothes, and that hits home with me because my parents met on the set of the Emperor's New Clothes high school play that their high school was doing.
Oh my goodness, we're gonna run with that. Rick and I talked earlier, and I came up with a different version of the elephant. 5 blind men and the elephant. Each one touches it differently, and I've written it and I've drafted it already, Rick. And our 5 people are engineers, and some of the engineers reach in and touch the nervous system, and then the owner reaches in and touches the brain, because the brain has got to get the elephant to food and water. And it's the owner's goals that are moving things. And this is a way to assist the nervous system. So all the parts of the elephant are moving in the same direction that the owner wants them to. So we're going to have some fun with storytelling.
Oh, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Rick.
Pleasure.
And we're going to try not to overwhelm our audience with all Linux all the time, but clearly we've got excitement about this, and we might have to, set up a different time format instead of just Thursdays at 3, where we want to have a constant flow of new ideas. Maybe some other day, the first Tuesday or something like that, and we can have ongoing approaches. So it's a work in progress. You can join the Coalition for Smarter Buildings. You can join the Linux Foundation. Rick, do you have a Linux email address yet?
I still have the C4SB one, so it's rick@c4sb.org, and it's C and then the number 4 SB.
Here it is. I just put it in the chat.
And in terms of working with the Linux Foundation, individuals are encouraged to join the Linux Foundation and participate in working groups, which we will start to be. We've already got several working groups going. We're going to be having more. Participating in the working groups only requires that you agree to the principles of how the work is going to be done and how the work will be shared. There's no membership dues per se. Now, the Linux Foundation loves to have paying members, as I know all organizations like.
Mhm.
have members that are, but in terms of participating and contributing, that can all be done, or coming in, sitting in and listening in on some of the meetings, that can all be done without having to make any financial contribution.
And the whole idea is this is new territory, and the people who get involved early are going to help shape the direction and will therefore become expert and have commercial opportunities from their early involvement. So everybody knows that's the way to advance your careers or your business. So that part's the same and hasn't changed at all.
For sure.
Well, Rick, really good talking with you. I look forward to many similar discussions and success stories when we get to tell that the national labs has instituted this across all of their facilities, or the Department of Defense is instituting this, and we will be having those types of talks. So thank you, and thank you to all the audience. Thank you, Nick. We'll just fade out for now, and we'll see everyone next week. Bye.